In every breath I find your grace. In the rhythm of life your majesty shines in every place. In the rhythm of life your majesty shines in every place. Recognition of Allah.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil mursaleen amma ba'd fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim bismillahir rahmanir rahim as-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Rasulallah wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Habiballah as-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Nabiyallah wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Nurallah. Welcome dear viewers to another episode of our program Recognition of Allah Almighty. In the previous episode we were discussing the various means of gaining the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in particular in the previous episode we covered studying the hadith literature to learn more about our Creator. We heard about some narrations in which the sifat of Allah, the dhat of Allah were mentioned, and there's plenty of hadith like that. Then we moved on and we spoke about another means of gaining the ma'rifah of Allah, and that is to look at the athar, the signs of the sifat of Allah which are all around us. We discussed how if you look at how Allah is the Rabb of all the world, the cherisher of all the worlds, the sustainer, the nourisher, and how He provides rizq to everyone. We spoke about people who are in the jungles, their rizq is there. Aquatic animals, their rizq is there. Wherever creation is, Allah Ta'ala has provided rizq accordingly. And we'll begin today by speaking about the sifa of Allah known as takhliq, the creating power of Allah, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we were to do ghor, ponder, reflect and contemplate upon that, subhanAllah, again we will gain immense ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look for example at insan, humankind itself. Billions of people have existed since the beginning. Now look at the power of Allah's creation, the creating power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that every single human being has a unique DNA. People who study science, they would know this to a greater level, that no two DNAs are the same. In the hair, the bone, the flesh, the body parts of a person, the DNA that is extracted or the DNA that is assigned to a person, that is unique to that person. Person could be living in the same household, be a sibling, be a child of someone. DNA is different. Fingerprints are different. Allahu Akbar Kabira. This is the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If someone says this came by chance, you would say that person is a foolish individual, that he cannot realize or recognize that there is a greater force, there's a greater power behind this, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That gives us ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that every single person has a unique DNA. Allahu Akbar Kabira. Yes, people resemble each other, but no two faces are exactly the same. No two countenances, appearances are exactly the same. People can be twins, triplets. Again, you'll be able to tell the difference. There are differences. That's the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have 2 ears, we have a nose, we have eyes, we have lips, His face, but no two people are exactly the same. Allahu Akbar Kabira. This is the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. Blessed is Allah, greatest of creators. He is the greatest creator. And we create as humans, this is through the power of Allah. This is through the given intellect of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who independently creates, who is intrinsically creates. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Another point, Allah ta'ala created the heavens and the earth. خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. When we look at the heavens and the earth, how do we gain ma'rifah of Allah through that? Allah Ta'ala created the heavens and the earth without a previous example. He is the originator of the heavens and the earth. Badi'u as-samawati wal ard. He is the initiator. And this means that without a previous example, Allah Ta'ala brought it into existence. Allah Ta'ala is not in need of having a previous example to model the heavens upon or the earth upon. Allah Ta'ala is free from that. Insan is in need of having a previous example. People who build cars, for example, people who build mansions, people who build housing projects, people who build schools, hotels, sports halls, wedding halls, whatever. They need something to model their creation upon. And when they look at those examples, they say, okay, we'll keep this bit, we'll modify this, we'll change this design, we'll do this. But Allah Ta'ala is Badi'u as-samawati wal ard. He needs no previous example of anything. He originates things, unique things, unparalleled things. Allahu Akbar Kabira. So these are all examples of when we look at the athar of the sifat of Allah, the signs of the sifat of Allah, Him being a Lord, Him being a Raziq, Him being Khaliq. When we look at these things on a deep level, we all gain ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what's another great means of gaining the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That is adopting the sohbah, the companionship of the awliya Allah, the companionship of the saints of Allah. Why? Because they have proximity to Allah. They have greater levels of ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than us. They know Allah on a deeper level. Allah ta'ala opens the doors of ma'rifah for them because of their obedience, because of their servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of their avoiding sin, because of their acting upon the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you sit in the company of a wali, a saint of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, subhanallah, you gain ma'rifah. This is, you could say, a quick route, fast track to gaining the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you're sitting with a kamil person in the first place. Otherwise, if you were to try and traverse this journey all by yourself, you might tire yourself out and still not achieve anything. And this happens. But those who sit with the awliya Allah, those who sit with the salihin, those who sit with the righteous, they're on this fast track. That sohbah is what brings about great change in their lives, grants them great ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you sit with a wali, you listen carefully to his words. Those words are special. Those words are unparalleled. Those words are unique. Those words are powerful and profound. They bring about this revolution in your life. They transform the state of your heart. Why? Because that saint has a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And their speech is different. They don't speak like ordinary people. Just look at the literature of the saints of Islam, the tasawwuf literature of the Sufiya, rahimahumullah ta'ala. Those books on tasawwuf, if you study them, you will realize that this is not ordinary speech. Speech that touches the heart, that penetrates the heart, that affects the heart and moves the heart. That is the speech of the awliya Allah. Look at Sayyiduna Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, al-Qawth al-A'zam radiyallahu ta'ala. Look at his book Sirul Asrar. Study his book Futuhul Ghaib, various other books. When you study them, you realize, whoa, this speech is unlike other people's speech. This speech is special. This speech is mu'athir, is effective. Now many times the words are not complex. The message isn't very difficult to understand. But it's who's saying it. The effect of the pen of the saint, the khitab, the address of the saint, that is what works wonders for a person. But anyone who reads those works, subhanAllah, is definitely affected. And the works of tasawwuf are indispensable. When you read Al-Quran Al-Kareem, when you read the commentaries of the Quran, there's this particular usloob, a manner, a style. But the manner of writings in books of tasawwuf are completely different. Subhanallah. They have the khulasa of the teachings of Quran and Sunnah. They affect the heart greatly. That's why the books of tasawwuf should be read. And they're based on experiences of the saint, the struggles of the saint, the mujahada of the saint, real life experiences. When you read them, you implement them, you internalize them, you actualize them, subhanallah, great change occurs in the lives of those who are devoted to the Sufiya Kiram. A great change is developed in the life of those who are devoted to the Salihin, the awliya Allah. So when you read the books of tasawwuf, ma'rifah, gnosis, recognition of Allah is being attained very quickly, subhanallah. Look at books like Kashful Mahjoob of Data Ganjbakhsh Ali Hajwari rahmatullahi alayhi, an amazing book in this regard. Or the masterpiece work of Imam Abul Qasim Qushayri rahmatullahi alayhi, titled Risala Qushayriya. Subhanallah, a superb work, a work that should be studied and should be read, should be understood and acted upon as well. Let's listen to something that's found in this very work, Risala Qushayriya, Babul Ma'rifah. There's a whole chapter titled Babul Ma'rifah. Chapter regarding the Ma'rifah of Allah, the recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this he quotes many of the saints of the Ummah, the Salihin of the Ummah, the likes of Sayyiduna Sari Saqti, Sayyiduna Sulaiman Darani, Sayyidina Dhunnun Misri, Sayyidina Junaid Baghdadi, Sayyidina Mansur bin Hussein Hallaj, etc. Now he writes in this chapter that a person does not become an arif, someone who has immense gnosis and recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, until he is given everything, all the bounties of the world, all the blessings of the world, yet he is never neglectful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a moment. Allahu Akbar Kabira. Think about that. You have wealth, you have abundance, you have everything at your disposal, you can fulfill any lawful desire, you have no shortage of anything, yet you're never ghafil, heedless of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Abul Qasim Qushayri rahmatullahi alayhi is saying that you cannot be an arif until that you have everything and you're still attentive towards the court of Allah. You're not neglectful. Now, this is a big test, a very great test for a believer. Imagine someone woke up and he had all the riches of the world. The love of those things would dominate his heart, especially in this day and age where people have a lack of knowledge, probably end up, ma'azallah, utilizing those things for haram. But the true people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, despite having everything, they're never neglectful of Allah. They're never neglectful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Quran Kareem tells us this. رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِيهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْعٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. That there are such men in creation that business transactions, none of these things distract them عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. None of these things make them heedless of the dhikr, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is at the foremost of their mind. He is the greatest priority for them. Worshipping Allah, pleasing Allah, obeying Allah, showing servitude to Allah, showing humility before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is how someone becomes an arif billah. Allahu Akbar. So this is from the book Risala Qushayriya. That's just one point. Countless points scattered in the books of Tasawwuf, subhanallah. Another one of the saints has said that the one who has ma'rifah of Allah must have three qualities. And we should all ponder whether we have these. Number one, hayba of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The example, just for explanatory purposes, if all of a sudden a great king, a great leader became present before a subject, a citizen, he'd be shocked, startled, overawed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without comparison, meaning the creation is nothing compared to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What a person thinks about his Lord and how he's present at all times, he's witnessing everything, he's seeing everything, he's qadeem, he's all powerful, that awe that overtakes this person, Allahu Akbar, he's overawed. This is one sign of a wali, an arif billah, someone who has great ma'rifah of Allah. And this is all because of the grandeur of Allah, the greatness of Allah, the exaltedness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, the sign of an arif billah, sign of someone who has ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that he will have haya before Allah. He will have modesty before Allah. He'll be bashful. He will never do something that he knows that Allah is displeased with, that is shameful, that is embarrassing, that will lead to humiliation, disgrace. So this haya should be ghalib, dominant in a person's heart, if he is to be one of those who have ma'rifah, great ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has haya before he's created. Today we have haya before worldly people. I can't do something wrong in this function or that gathering or here or there. What will become of me? I'll be barred, I'll be blacklisted, this will happen, that will happen. We think so deeply about this 60, 70, 80 year life. All my life I'll be condemned, I'll be rebuked. But before Allah, meaning Allah sees us at all times, when we're alone, in solitude, in private, Allahu Akbar Kabira. Do we ever think like this? My Lord is watching. People of the world can't do anything. In reality, it's Allah who allows them to do anything. If He doesn't will it, nobody can harm us or benefit us. But Allah Ta'ala most definitely can give you benefit. Allah Ta'ala most definitely can take you to task. Allah Ta'ala most definitely can seize you and punish you. Yet before Allah, when we're alone, when we know our Creator is watching, we're still looking over our shoulders. Is some human being watching me or not? And we commit sins day and night. Allahu Akbar Kabira. Where's the fear of Allah? Where's that haya before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And thirdly, this buzurg, this pious person, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that a person should have uns, familiarity with his creator. He should attain comfort in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, peace and serenity when he thinks about his creator. Comfort, peace, serenity, tranquility, all of these emotions overcome him, subhanallah. And he is drowned in these feelings, which are beneficial, which are helpful, which provide success to a believer. You know, we say in the dunya that he is very close to so-and-so. He enjoys his company. Without comparison, a believer should be like that to a great extent with his Lord. When he thinks about his Lord, he just wants to worship his Lord, he wants to pray to his Lord, he wants to please his Lord, he wants to be in the company of his Lord. And we are in the company of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's upon us to choose what we do in that time. Remember, Allah ta'ala will deal with a person the way he thinks of him. Ana inda dhanni abdi bi. So when we're at home, we're at the workplace, wherever we are, we have this belief that Allah is with me, Allah is my helper, Allah is my aid, Allah ta'ala is the one who showers mercy upon me. We have uns, we have that comfort in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that familiarity, that closeness. That's what an arif billah has, the one whose heart is dominated by the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He thinks about his creator at all times. Allahu akbar kabira. So when a person reaches this level, this status, this rank, Allahu akbar, then the ulama, the sulaha, the sufiya, the awliya have said that an arif billah, such doors of ma'rifah opened for him on his bed. He's laying on his bed, he's resting, but such doors of ma'rifah opened for him there that are not even open for someone who's on the musalla, someone who is praying to his Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does this mean? Many times we stand on that musalla at home, when we go to the masjid to pray namaz, our thoughts are here, there and everywhere. We forget the number of rak'at. We don't have khushu and khuzu in our prayer. This is what the awliya are trying to teach us, that many people are worshipping Allah, but without any effort, without the soul being involved, without spirituality. They're not attaining anything. They're fulfilling an obligation, yes, and that too if they perform it correctly. But a wali of Allah who has great ma'rifah of Allah, an arif billah, he's on his bed, he's lying down, but zahir, it doesn't seem like anything's occurring. He's receiving secrets from the court of Allah, he's receiving blessings from the court of Allah, he's receiving openings, futuhat from the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the great distinction, this is the great difference between an arif, the one who knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deeply, and an ordinary believer. And it's our responsibility throughout our life to gain more ma'rifah of Allah, to not allow this knowledge of Allah to become stagnant. Like in the dunya, people take all these courses, continuous learning, they get certificates for it, and then they show it to their workplaces, and it's compulsory in certain professions. But as Muslims, where is that continuous development of ma'rifah of Allah? Are we ascending the stages of ma'rifah or not? Or ma'azallah, are we descending? Are we in the dark? Are we losing that ma'rifah because of sins, because of wrongful actions? What is the case with us? Only we can answer that. So in this episode, briefly we discussed how to gain more ma'rifah of Allah. What means should be adopted? We discussed how we should ponder upon the athar, the signs of the sifat of Allah. We discussed that in detail. And then we spoke about how a great way of gaining ma'rifah of Allah is to be in the company of the awliya, the sulaha, the righteous, the salihin. What they can give us in a short space of time, perhaps we cannot attain that throughout our life. That's why if there's awliya, sulaha, righteous people in your locality, go to them, visit them, sit in their company, learn from their speech, learn from their ahwal, their states. Their states can teach us great things as well. Just them being quiet, and we will learn from them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us this tawfiq to visit the awliya, to visit the sulaha, and to benefit from their knowledge so that we can increase in ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ameen. Bijahi Nabi al-Ameen. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam.
In every breath I find your grace. In the rhythm of life life, your majesty shines in every place. In the rhythm of life, your majesty shines in every place. Recognition of Allah.